welcome your governor, Tom Wolf.
Thank you. So let me introduce myself again. I'm John Fetterman's running mate. So it is such an honor to be here with all of you and with Senator Bob Casey and of course President Obama. I am really inspired to see how many people came out here today. This is really great. You all know what is at stake in November, right? Because right now, Donald Trump and the Republicans are trying to roll back what President Obama and Senator Casey have accomplished. And here in Pennsylvania, my opponent, Scott Wagner, wants to take Pennsylvania backwards. Now listen, one of the most important things President Obama did while he was in office was to make sure, I'm right here, right? Was to make sure that more Americans have access to affordable and quality health care, right? And thanks to President Obama, I was able to expand Medicaid in Pennsylvania, and we now have 720,000 Pennsylvanians from health care. As a result, our uninsured rate is at its lowest level ever. And I have stood up, and I will continue to stand up to anyone who tries to strip health care away from people with pre-existing conditions or from our seniors. But here's the deal. In Washington, there are people trying to roll back Obamacare. In fact, right here, just saying, right here in Pennsylvania, Scott Wagner, my opponent, wants to roll back Medicaid expansion. We can't let that happen. But health care, you know, is not the only issue on the ballot in November. Under President Obama, gay marriage was made legal, finally, in the United States. And here in Pennsylvania, I've established our nation's first LGBTQ commission and protected state government employees from being discriminated against because of who they love. And I will continue to fight every day for a statewide anti-discrimination law. Now, my opponent, Scott Wagner, says he would consider a bill making gay marriage illegal if it got to his desk. How about other things? President Obama always fought for funding for organizations like Planned Parenthood. And he always stood up for a woman's right to make her own health care decisions. Here in Pennsylvania, I vetoed a Republican bill that would make abortion illegal after 20 weeks. And I said I would immediately veto a new bill that would ban abortion after only 6 weeks. That's before most women know they're even pregnant. I have stood firm against any legislation that would defund Planned Parenthood. My opponent, Wagner, wants to defund Planned Parenthood, and he wants to ban abortion at 6 weeks. I'm not going to do that. Every step throughout his 2 terms in office, President Obama worked to make it easier to vote. Here's another thing. And make our election system more fair and more secure. I have tried to follow in his footsteps to make our democracy fair by vetoing Republicans' gerrymandered congressional maps. And by finally implementing online voter registration. But Scott Wagner says he wants to impeach the Pennsylvania Supreme Court justices who ruled that our congressional map was unfair and has to be redrawn. Why is that? I've made it a priority to ensure that the diverse voices of all Pennsylvanians are heard in my administration. That's why I've supported small and diverse businesses. I've created the Gun Violence Reduction Initiative by working with the Black Caucus in Harrisburg. And I'm not just paying lip service to this. I hired and I have appointed, among others, the first African-American general counsel to serve as general counsel in the history of Pennsylvania. The first African-American to serve as chairman of the Delaware River Port Authority, Ryan Boyer. The first African-American to serve as chair of the State Board of Education. The first African-American treasurer of Pennsylvania, and so many more. I will continue to do that. I signed clean slate legislation. Pennsylvania is the first state in the union to have clean slate legislation. I have worked to reduce mass incarceration. We now have 3,000 fewer individuals in our state prisons than when I took office. And our crime rate is down. So we must all work together to ensure Pennsylvania leads the nation in rehabilitation, not in incarceration. This is what we're fighting for. This is what we're fighting for. I am standing up as the last line of defense for President Obama's legacy and for all the democratic values we hold dear. My opponent wants to undo all the progress that President Obama made, and he wants to undo all the progress that I have made in the past 3.5 years. We cannot let him do this. Too much is at stake for all of us. That means your support, all of your support, is now more important than ever. We have to work to elect Democrats up and down the ballot this November. Let's do that. Nothing less than our democracy is at stake. So let me thank President Obama for joining us today. And he's here to encourage all of us in Pennsylvania to work hard to make sure all of us in this Commonwealth go to the polls on November 6th. We cannot afford to sit on our sidelines. We cannot afford to sit this one out. Let's register to vote. Make sure we are there at the polls on November 6th. Can you do that? All right. Now, thank you. It is my great honor to introduce the senior senator from Pennsylvania, Senator Bob Casey.
Thank you, Philadelphia. Thank you, Governor Wolf. Governor, thank you very much. I want to thank Mayor Kenney for being here, Representative Evans, and those great House candidates that you saw up here. We're going to turn the tide in the United States House of Representatives. I want to thank everyone here who's helping us in this campaign, not just the governor's campaign and my campaign, but all of ours, the people behind us, the people out front. How many veterans do we have here? Put your hand up. Thank you for your service to our country. I want to thank the men and the women of organized labor who are here. Thank you. I got one question, folks. It's not a hard one. Are you ready to win in 2018? All right. because we love our country, and we believe, when it comes to federal policy, we believe that the Republican Congress and this administration is taking us in the wrong direction. We believe that. We want change, and we're going to get change in November. And we got a lot of battles to fight. Battles for the middle class. Battles to help those struggling to get into the middle class. Battles on behalf of the American worker. And battles, of course, for the vulnerable who've been cast aside by this administration. We've got a lot of work to do and a lot of battles to fight, but we need your help. If you are not registered, please register to vote. I ask you as well, please keep marching. Please keep mobilizing and door knocking and helping our candidates. And when we work together between now and Election Day, and when we vote together in November, we will win. So, I have the honor to introduce the 44th President of the United States. But wait. I'm going to do a little summary of what he did for our country. A very brief summary, but let me tell you about his work. You know that he took office at a moment of crisis unlike any America had seen in decades, a nation at war, a planet in peril, the American dream itself threatened by the worst economic calamity since the Great Depression, and yet, despite all manner of political obstruction by Republicans, his leadership helped rescue the economy, revitalize the auto industry, reform the healthcare system to cover 20 million Americans, put the country on a firm course to a clean energy future, all while overseeing the longest stretch of job creation in American history. It is my honor to introduce to you Barack Obama.
Pennsylvania. I know we did an early kickoff here so that we can get people home in time for Friday Night Lights football action. It is so good to be with so many good friends. First of all, give it up for your outstanding governor, Tom Wolf. We have an amazing, and I do not exaggerate, amazing slate of congressional candidates to flip the House. We've got Madeline Dean in the House, and Chrissy Houlihan in the House, and Mary Gay Scanlon, and George Scott, and Scott Wallace, and Susan Wild. And we have a man I love, your Senator Bob Casey. I love me some Bob do. He just, you know, Bob is just, he's one of the nicest people I know. He is like a genuinely nice person. And he's been in Washington a long time, and he stayed nice, which is hard to do. And part of the reason that Bob will always have a special place in my heart is that, you know, when I ran for president, he came out for me early, even when some of y'all could not pronounce my name. And when I was not favored to win. And he was there, and that's how you can measure a friend and a stand-up guy. It's easy to be with you when you're up, but when they're with you when you're down, that is a sign of a friend. So I just wanted to say I love me some Bob Casey. Anyway. So look, I heard this was a very nice amphitheater. I wanted to check out the Dell. I was missing Philly. I hadn't been here in a while. I've been watching how things are going. I have not been here since you guys won a Super Bowl. I know. You're kind of feeling yourself a little bit. And then you got the process going on. I know the Sixers, you know, so I know you're feeling good, but even though I love being with you, I actually came here for some business. I came here to deliver a very simple message, and that is to vote. My message, Pennsylvania, is vote. Now, I shouldn't really have to deliver the message. I would have thought by now folks had figured out it's important to vote. But some people may not have heard the news yet. So I'm here to deliver it. This November's election is more important than any I can remember in my lifetime. Now, politicians will say that all the time. I said it when I was running and I was on the ballot. Obviously, it was the most important election to me. But this time it really is different. This time the stakes really are higher. The consequences of any of us sitting on the sidelines are far more dangerous. And because it's a midterm election, because it's a non-presidential election, there is a tendency for young people, for African-American Latino folks, for casual voters to sit out and say, well, I'm going to wait until the presidential election. This one is actually more important. This is actually more important than any election that we've seen in a long time. Now, we have had big elections before. We've had big choices in our democracy before. Democracy has never been easy. Our founders argued about all kinds of things. We waged a civil war to make sure that we weren't living in a country that was half slave and half free. We overcame a Great Depression. We've had a women's movement and workers' movements and civil rights movements to expand the franchise. We have had a lot of fights in this country about a lot of important issues, and each time we've made progress, we've also then had retrenchment. Sometimes we've gone forward, and then sometimes we've gone backwards. The good news is the broader story of America has been one of progress. The The good news is that for all our ups and downs, America's become more free and more just and more equal and more prosperous than it was in the past. It's not perfect. We've got a lot more work to do, but slowly we have tried to move forward. And the progress we made was not because of one leader. It wasn't because a guy made a good speech. I love you too, baby, but I've got to explain. It wasn't just because of one leader. It wasn't because of one law. It was one because rather than be bystanders to history, ordinary Americans marched and mobilized. They knocked on doors. They talked to their neighbors. They went on picket lines. They voted to make history. Every time we try to pull ourselves closer to the American ideal, that all of us are created equal, endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Every time that happens, somebody who likes things the way they are, somebody who's benefiting from power and privilege, push back. And they'll push any way they can. Sometimes they push back directly. Sometimes they're sneaky. And they'll try to divide working people. And they'll try to make you feel as if you've got no power. And they'll try to make you cynical because it helps them keep their power and their privilege. And we're living through one of those moments right now. It didn't start with one guy. We didn't get here overnight. For a long time now, there's been anxiety and fear and uncertainty that's been building because we live in a rapidly changing world, and the economy's changing, and the face of America's changing, and technology is changing, and all of that has challenged who we are and forced us to adapt. And we see things we're not accustomed to, and we get stressed, and we get scared. We don't know what the future is going to bring. And partly because these are serious challenges that require serious responses. It's easy sometimes, when people are feeling uncertain and insecure, to hear voices that stir up fears and try to make us feel more divided. And we're in one of those moments right now. We're in a moment where there's backlash against progress. You know, when I was president, Bob was mentioning, we had to work to deal with the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. Bob was there helping every step of the way. And the actions we took during the crisis turned the economy around, started the longest streak of job creation on record, which continues to this day. And we covered another 20 million people with health insurance. And we cut our deficits in half. And we made sure the wealthiest Americans paid their fair share of taxes. So, by the time we were done, wages were up, the uninsured rate was down. So when you hear right now, folks take credit for this economic miracle, it's like, hold up. Hold up. Hold up. just started. Please. Anyhow, here's the thing though, we couldn't reverse some of these long-term trends, right? We've seen manufacturing jobs leave the country. That was still happening. We saw rising inequality that was still taking place. We saw the fact that the rate of unionization was still dropping. There were still a lot of trends that made life harder for ordinary people, working people. We we're making progress, but then once the Republicans took over Congress, they just decided we're going to stop progress. We're going to block everything. They wouldn't even do stuff that they used to support, just because I was proposing. So even though we did pull the economy out of crisis, even though the unemployment rate went down, there were still issues that were unaddressed, and people who were once solidly middle class still felt insecure. The same way that even though overseas we took out bin Laden, and we wound down the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, people still saw on TV that there were a lot of threats out there, and terrorists, and so, okay. So yeah, okay. So these challenges, these challenges frayed our civic trust, and they made people feel like the game was rigged. And then you got all this big money coming into politics, and it felt like, you know what, all the politicians, they're not listening to us, they're listening to lobbyists and a bunch of folks, who are pulling the strings behind the scenes, and opportunists then start exploiting these frustrations. And they reach back into our history of racial division, and ethnic division, and religious division. And they appeal to tribe. They appeal to fear. And they try to pit people against each other. And they tell us, oh, order and security is going to be restored if it weren't for those folks. Those people who don't look like us, or don't pray the same way we do. That's an old playbook. I see you back there, by the way. I know y'all been worried. So, the closer you get to election day, the more you will see stuff like this. This is what politicians fall back on. I don't watch TV generally, but I could already tell you what the ads are, right? They're trying to scare the heck out of you. They'll say, candidate such and such. They're going to let in murderers into your house. And, that's what they do. And you'll be seeing more of that. And the thing is, the good news is in a healthy democracy, that kind of fear-mongering doesn't work. In a healthy democracy, our antibodies kick in, right? People of goodwill from both parties, they'll call out the bigots and the fear-mongers, and they'll work to compromise and get things done. But when there's a vacuum in our democracy, when we do not vote, when we take our basic rights for granted, then other voices fill the void. And they promise to fight for the little guy, even as they are helping the wealthiest and the most powerful. And they promise that they're going to take on corruption in Washington. And then they just plunder. And they start undermining our institutions of democracy, just so it can entrench their power further. And they'll unwind our campaign finance laws so that billionaires have even more influence. And they'll make it even harder for young people to vote, and minorities to vote, and the poor to vote. And they'll subsidize corporate polluters. And they'll give $1.5 trillion in tax cuts to folks like me who don't need them. And they'll pretend that they're paying for them, but they're not. And they know that eventually, to pay for it, they'll be able to argue that we should cut help for working families, cut Medicare. You know what? None of that is conservative. Don't let them fool you. It's not normal. It's radical what they're doing. They've got a vision that says that all they want to do is protect their power, even if it hurts the country, even if it hurts their own constituents. We've got governors around the country who did not expand Medicaid the way Tom Wolf did, even though they had hundreds of thousands of people in their state who needed health insurance because they didn't think it was good politically. So you've got folks who are entirely comfortable with the idea that high-priced lobbyists and unlimited campaign contributions should set the agenda. And let's be honest right now, the Republicans in Congress right now, they're no check on the White House. They're bending over backwards to shield folks from scrutiny and accountability. So, look, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. You know this. Here's the good news. On November 6th, you have a chance to restore some sanity to our politics. On November 6th, you can tip the balance of power back to the people. Because there's only one real check on bad policy, and there's only one real check on the abuse of power, and that is you, the American people, standing up and deciding to cast your ballot. And the good news is, I've got some even better news. Sometimes you go to vote, it's just to vote against something. Now you got some reason to vote against something. But the good news is right now you got something to vote for. You've got these amazing Democratic candidates right here. And the reason it's so important to stand up for them is because they're going to stand up for you. They're going to stand up to bad behavior in Washington, but they're also going to stand up for you. Now look, if Republicans keep Congress this fall, they're going to try to cut health care again. They said so. But these Democrats, they believe that in America access to affordable health care, that's not a privilege, that's a right. They will protect your care. They will stand up for the 5.3 million Pennsylvanians who've got pre-existing conditions and depend on that coverage. But to protect it, you've got to vote and send them to Congress. If a Republican took the governor's mansion this fall, they might undermine or roll back Medicaid expansion. Without a serious alternative, that would leave people with disabilities and seniors in nursing homes potentially out in the cold. That would put folks who are caught up in this terrible opioid epidemic at even greater risk because they would have more difficulty accessing treatment. Governor Wolf expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, covered 700,000 Pennsylvanians. You know he's going to protect your care. But to make sure he keeps on doing it, you got to vote. You got to vote for Governor Wolf. Democrats believe that a growing economy should benefit everybody, not just a few. So rather than let Congress keep attacking unions, we've got to stand up for the right of workers to organize for higher wages and stronger benefits. Rather than stand up for big banks and for-profit colleges, we got to help more Pennsylvania students earn a higher education so they can get a good job and they don't have to go broke doing it. Rather than side with the big drug companies, we got to bring down the cost of prescription medicine. But to do that, you've got to vote for people who actually have a plan to do it and have a history of doing it and will follow through on doing it. And you've got to convince people, even folks who aren't Democrats, on every issue. you've got to convince them this election is too important. You've got to think about things. People of both parties should be concerned about the current course of this country. Folks should want to see a restoration of some homespun values. Honesty, decency, lawfulness. You don't have to be a Democrat or a Republican to say that it's not good to pressure the Attorney General or the FBI to use the criminal justice system to punish political enemies. That's what they do in some dictatorships. That's not what we do here in the United States of America. That's not how stuff works here. You don't have to be a Democrat or a Republican to say we don't threaten newspapers or TV stations if they publish stories we don't like. There were a whole bunch of stories I didn't like. I didn't threaten folks. I might just complain. I might say to Michelle, hey, that's not fair. But because we live in a democracy. But in order to protect those basic rights, you gotta vote. You don't have to be a Democrat or a Republican to say that we do not target people based on how they look, how they pray, what their last name is, what their sexual orientation is. That's not right. Treating people fairly, treating people with their innate dignity, that is not a Republican or a Democratic issue. That's a human issue. That's an American issue. Come on. How hard is it to treat people fairly? Come on. You're supposed to learn that in the sandbox, right? You teach that when like somebody's 3 or 4. You say, no, you should treat that person nicely, right? Look, there are conservatives who think that it's not responsible to run up $1 trillion deficits for our children. There are conservatives who think there's nothing compassionate about separating immigrant children from their moms. I believe that there are Republicans out there who think that, we need a limited government, but one of those things they should do is make sure that when the hurricane comes, people are taken care of. So look, I say this because, to some degree, I'm preaching to the choir if you got to take it here. But hopefully some folks beyond this amphitheater are also listening. We don't have to agree on everything, but we do have to agree on some basic things. And we have to have elected officials who, even if we don't agree with them on everything, we trust them to do the basic things, the core values that make us proud as Americans. Who aren't gonna, we need leaders who are actually gonna stand up for what's right, regardless of party loyalty, and who are gonna fight for you, and fight for what's best in the American spirit. All right, so you can tell I'm losing my voice because I'm out of practice. But here's I'm wrapping up. Fine. Come on. Here's the last thing I want to talk about, though, is I want to talk about the fact that I'm actually hopeful right now. And the reason I'm hopeful is because out of this political darkness, I see a great awakening happening. I am so encouraged because I'm watching people get involved for the first time, or they're waking up to the fact that I need to be involved after a very long time. So they're marching, they're organizing, they're registering people to vote, and they're running for office. Some people who never ran for office before, they decided, oh, this is too crazy, I gotta get in there. because they understood this time is different. This moment is too important to sit out. So they're military veterans like Chrissy Houlihan and George Scott. They're advocates who fight for Americans in need, like Mary Gay Scanlon and Scott Wallace and Susan Wild. They're moms who fought to protect our kids from gun violence, like Madeline Dean. By the way, Madeline taught ethics in college, so you know we need that in Congress. So you've got this movement of citizens, including, by the way, a record number of women, like Chrissy and Mary Gay and Susan Madeline. You know what? Pennsylvania is a great state. But let me just say, Pennsylvania, right now, you have no women in Congress. You can send 7 Democratic women to Washington if you vote. And I will tell you, and Michelle didn't put me up to this, stuff works better when women are involved. Government works better when women are represented in the halls of power. So we've got great candidates, but the key is you. The antidote to a government that is run just by a few people is a government by the organized and the energized. And that's what this moment's about. This election won't fix everything, but it can kickstart more progress. But you have to start it. You've got to start it in this election, and then you've got to go every election, every day. Pay attention. Be involved. The biggest threat to this democracy is not just one person in the White House. It's not just Republicans in Congress. The biggest threat to our democracy is indifference. The biggest threat to our democracy is cynicism. I'm talking to you, young people. You, pay attention. The biggest threat to our democracy is when young people think that it's not about me. I'm just going to look at my phone. Look at your phone to see where you can vote. Look at your phone to see how can I get involved. If you don't like what's going on right now, don't complain. Don't hashtag. Don't get all anxious. Don't put your head in the sand. Don't boo. Don't just sit back with your boys and act like you too cool. Vote. 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 And by the way, wait. And by the way, I want you to vote for Bob Casey. And I want you to vote for Tom Wolf. And I want you to vote for these great congressional candidates. But, and this is important, I also want you to vote for mayors and sheriffs and state legislators and state's attorneys and district attorneys. If you are a young person that cares about the criminal justice system, well, who do you think enforces the criminal justice system? Who do you think decides whether or not something bad has happened, whether or not there's going to be justice done? It's a state's attorney. It's not a president. It's somebody on the local level that you have the power to decide who that person is. You know, when you vote, you can make sure elections are fair. When your state Supreme Court threw out an unfair electoral map, that's because people voted. We can make that happen all across the country. When you vote, you have the power to strengthen laws to make sure that women are protected from harassment and discrimination, and that they're paid equally. When you vote, you can make college more affordable for students. You can make it harder for some disturbed person to shoot up a classroom. When you vote, you can make sure somebody keeps their health insurance. You can save somebody's life. You have that power in your hands. It takes half an hour to go vote. Look, we have been through harder times than these, and every generation took us somewhere better, not by sitting around and waiting for somebody else to do it, but by leading a movement for change. That's the power you have right now. So if you get involved and knock on some doors and talk to your friends, talk to your family members, convince some new voters, get them to vote with this entire Pennsylvania team, something powerful will happen. Change will happen. Hope will happen. And every time that, just a new law helps a kid read, or a new law helps a family get shelter, a new law helps a veteran get support, it gets a little more hopeful. We take one more step in the direction of justice and fairness and equality and opportunity, and hope spreads. It's up to you to spread hope. It's up to you to make change. Pennsylvania, are you going to vote? Let's get to work. Thank you, everybody. God bless.